Journalists, on the other hand, shouldn't have what you called a glass jaw when it comes to some of these investigations, citing the First Amendment and threats to the First Amendment.
Well, the First Amendment is a critically important part of the Constitution. It is not unconditional.
At 86, Tom Brokaw has earned that authority 10 times over. He is, by almost any measure, the last living monument of a golden era in American broadcast journalism. He stood at the Berlin Wall. He gave voice to the greatest generation. He delivered the news to 100 million Americans with a calm that made you feel like, no matter how bad things were, someone steady was still at the wheel. And for a long time, he kept his thoughts about the current state of his beloved industry, and the woman now leading it, carefully to himself. But that time is over. At 86, Tom Brokaw is finally speaking up about Savannah Guthrie, and what he has to say is worth every word. To understand why Brokaw's voice still carries weight, you have to understand what he built. He didn't grow up with a silver spoon or a Hollywood connection. He came out of South Dakota with a restless mind, a natural voice, and an almost reckless work ethic. He clawed his way through local stations and regional assignments before landing at NBC, where he would eventually become one of the most recognized faces in the history of American news. He wasn't just reading headlines. He was shaping how the country understood itself. His reporting on Watergate, Vietnam, and the Cold War wasn't background noise. It was the primary text of American life for an entire generation. When he stepped down from the NBC nightly news anchor chair in 2004, it felt less like a retirement and more like the closing of a chapter in American history. People genuinely mourned it, not because they were losing a TV personality, but because they were losing a kind of certainty. The feeling that somewhere out there, one steady, credible voice was sorting through the chaos and telling you what actually mattered. That was the Brokaw era. And for the 2 decades since, Tom has watched from a distance, as the world he helped build has transformed almost beyond recognition. The journalism landscape Savannah Guthrie inherited looks almost nothing like the one Tom Brokaw conquered. The 24-hour news cycle, the rise of social media, the collapse of institutional trust, the sheer volume of information and misinformation, flooding every screen, every minute of every day, all of it has fundamentally rewired the relationship between the anchor and the audience. In Brokaw's time, the anchor was an authority figure. You didn't talk back to Tom. You listened. His word carried the weight of granite. That granite pedestal no longer exists. Today's anchor must be a journalist, a brand, a personality, and somehow also a trusted friend, all before 9 a.m. The audience is no longer a passive congregation waiting for the evening sermon. They are active, opinionated, and armed with a comment section. They will fact-check you in real time, critique your tone, question your motives, and move on to another platform if you lose them for even a moment. It is, by any honest assessment, a far more brutal environment than anything Tom Brokaw ever faced. And yet, Savannah Guthrie not only survives in it, she thrives. Savannah Guthrie's story doesn't follow the traditional broadcast journalism template. She didn't come up through the police scanner and pancake breakfast circuit that defined an earlier generation. She was a lawyer first, a trained litigator who understood how to build an argument, find a contradiction, and stay composed under fire. When she transitioned into journalism, she brought that courtroom instinct with her, and it became her greatest professional weapon. She earned her spot at NBC through years of hard work that rarely made headlines. She stood in freezing rain outside the White House, waiting for press briefings that yielded almost nothing. She filed reports that most viewers barely noticed. She was patient in a business that rarely rewards patience, and disciplined in a building that was not always kind to people who looked like her. But she had something that couldn't be taught, an ability to make complicated things feel human. She could break down a Supreme Court ruling with the clarity of a great teacher, then pivot to a deeply personal conversation with a grieving family with the warmth of a close friend. That combination of precision and empathy is genuinely rare. Her real test, however, came not from any assignment she volunteered for, but from a crisis she didn't see coming. In 2017, the Today Show was rocked by one of the most damaging scandals in the history of morning television. Matt Lauer, who had been the face of the franchise for over 2 decades, was terminated following serious allegations of workplace misconduct. The fallout was swift, ugly, and deeply public. The institution that Tom Brokaw had helped build over a lifetime was suddenly wobbling. Viewers were shaken. The staff was shaken. And the cameras, as they always do, kept rolling. Savannah Guthrie sat at that desk and did something that her predecessors almost never did. She was honest. She didn't hide behind a carefully worded corporate statement or retreat into professional detachment. She told the audience she was heartbroken, confused, and trying to process the news right alongside them. It was a moment of radical transparency in a profession that had historically prized stoic composure above everything else. And it worked. Not because it was strategic, but because it was real. That morning, Savannah didn't just anchor the news. She became the emotional anchor for an audience that desperately needed one. That is the moment Tom Brokaw has been watching and quietly processing ever since. When Brokaw looks at Savannah Guthrie, he sees something that took him decades to fully recognize. A journalist who has mastered the tools of a completely different era without losing the core values of the craft. He sees her prosecutorial instincts, the way she listens not just for what a subject says, but for what they're carefully avoiding. He has noted her ability to hold powerful people accountable without ever losing the thread of the conversation or the trust of the audience watching at home. That, in Brokaw's world, is the gold standard. But beyond the professional skills, Brokaw sees something more personal: resilience. Tom knows what it looks like when someone keeps showing up despite everything life throws at them, because he has had to do it himself. His battle with multiple myeloma, diagnosed in 2013, was a humbling confrontation with mortality for a man who had spent his career projecting invincibility. He wrote about it with candor and grace, refusing to let the illness define him while also refusing to pretend it wasn't real. In Savanna, he recognizes that same refusal to be broken by circumstances beyond her control. Savannah's journey to motherhood in her 40s was not easy or seamless. It involved IVF, uncertainty, and the kind of emotional weight that doesn't get discussed enough in professional contexts. Then came the accident, a freak injury involving her young son, and a toy that nearly cost her the sight in one eye. Multiple surgeries. Weeks of recovery in the dark. The very real possibility that a career built on presence and perception might be permanently altered. She came back to that desk wearing glasses and carrying the story openly, because that is what she does. She brings the audience into the truth instead of protecting them from it. Brokaw recognizes that instinct. It connects them across 40 years and two entirely different versions of the same industry. There is something genuinely moving about the image of Tom Brokaw, at 86, choosing this moment to weigh in. He has nothing left to prove and nothing left to protect. He is not trying to stay relevant, and he is not settling old scores. He is simply doing what great journalists do, observing, and then telling the truth about what he sees. What he sees is a woman who has taken one of the hardest jobs in American media and made it look, if not easy, then at least purposeful. Savannah Guthrie has never tried to be the female version of Tom Brokaw. She has never tried to recreate the granite authority of the evening news anchor or the distant gravitas of a previous era. She has done something harder. She has invented a new model entirely, one built on connection, accountability, and the kind of honest vulnerability that Brokaw's generation would have considered professional suicide. The world Tom Brokaw built was about the delivery of truth. The world Savannah Guthrie operates in is about the defense of it. Those are two different jobs in two different universes, and the fact that she performs hers with the same fundamental integrity that Brokaw brought to his is, by any fair measure, remarkable. At a moment when trust in media is fragile, when the very concept of shared reality feels like it's under constant negotiation, Brokaw's decision to speak up about Guthrie carries real weight. He is not just complimenting a colleague. He is making a statement about what endures, about the qualities that matter in a journalist regardless of the era, the platform, or the pace. Honesty, grit, the ability to stay human under pressure, the courage to show up even when showing up is hard. Tom Brokaw built something that lasted. Savannah Guthrie is building something that will last too. And when the man who narrated the end of the 20th century reaches across the decades to say, simply, that she is the real deal, the industry and the audience would do well to listen. The microphone changes. The desk changes. The platform changes. But the storyteller, the one willing to look at the world clearly and tell the truth about what they see, that person will always ma.